Welcome to the ACS Podcast family.
We're your hosts, Angie and Charlene.
Where every week you can find new material centered around your life.
Thanks for joining us on our journey. Welcome to week 4 and episode 4. So we are on our 4th week of perception, and we realized that we didn't tell you guys even what the definition of perception is. So the definition of perception is a noun, and it is from the 1600s. It's actually a Latin word that means literally a taking beforehand or a previous notion. So your perception is all based on a previous notion of something that happened to you.
So I find that a really interesting thing to kind of think about and dissect, because how often do you go throughout your day and you have habits? You walk into a dark room and the first thing you do is turn on a light switch, right? You don't even think about it. You walk into a dark room, you want light, and you turn on a light switch. And unless the light bulb is burnt out or unless the electricity is out, you don't even think about that process and the fact that you're getting light from that. So that's on that preconceived notion or that perception that you know how electricity works, or you don't really know the ins and outs of it, but you know that if you flip that light switch, you're going to turn the light on and you're going to get the light that you want, and it becomes habitual. And that happens over and over again throughout our day. I was recently reading the book, Atomic Habits, and one of the statistics quoted in there is that well over half of our day is habitual, is habit-based. And those habits form based on the experiences that we have or the perceptions that we have about the experiences that we have. And when they repeat themselves long enough, we begin to make these associations, and that's where our habits come from and how we go throughout our day.
For sure. I know, like, a habit can be even something like getting your cup of coffee. Like, you can't start your day without your cup of coffee. But in reality, you can have a glass of water, and a lot of people do. But you've created that habit for you, or your tea, or whatever it is that you drink. Like, you have to start your day the same way each and every day.
Right. And so that's another really great example of how we use perceptions to influence our day, to create habits, and to come up with these routines or these rituals. But then you think about that, and we do that over and over again with the people and the relationships in our lives. I know that when I was married to my ex-husband, we would travel. We traveled quite a bit. And the day that we would travel, it was almost a guarantee that he was going to be kind of growly, kind of upset, kind of cranky, for lack of a better term. And we'd get in the car and we'd go, and after we'd get on the way, things would be okay. But that preparation and getting ready and the stress for him of having to leave things behind left him cranky. So that was, I always, put my armor on, and I was loaded for bear, and I knew that this was going to happen, and how was I going to deal with it, and how was I going to get through it? And now him and I are no longer together, and I've noticed that my son has picked up that habit, and his girlfriend tells me about it, that when they get ready to go somewhere, he's cranky until they get out the door. And she's like, oh, that's just the way he is, and, whatever. But I also realized that when I first started traveling with my new boyfriend, that I would expect that of him. We've traveled quite a bit. And at first, that was what I expected, because that was the perception that I had, is that the guys in my life are cranky when they get in the car to go travel, or when they get on the airplane to go travel, or that first day. And it turns out that he's not cranky at all. He gets right out of bed. He's ready to go. He's prepared and ready to go on time. And I used to be the first one sitting in the car waiting to go to the airport or to drive across the state or whatever. And I notice often he beats me out to the car, and he'll be sitting out in the car, and I'll be like, where did he go? And I'll go look, and he is ready to go with a smile on his face, patiently waiting for me to get ready.
Right.
So it's interesting that I had this perception, and I was holding on to this expectation and this perception that was no longer true. And we bring those perceptions over and over again because of experiences that we've had in the past. And just know that we can change those, and we can let go of those perceptions once we realize that we're having them or where they come in.
I think I'm a little bit in traveling more like your ex, but not about the traveling part. I want my dishes done. I want my bed sheets clean. Like, when I come home, I want it to look like a model home, and there's no stress. So I'm like, get it done. The crazy person, like, did you sweep the kitchen? No, go do it so we can leave. And we can still leave. The dust bunnies will still be on the floor when we get back. We can leave whenever. But I have that crazy, I want it to be perfect when I come home moments.
And where do you think that perception?
Oh, that's from my mother. If you're listening, Mom, that's from you. Thank you.
That's okay. I could totally relate. I like the house to be clean. There is nothing better than coming back from a trip to a clean home, right?
Right.
I totally get it. Clean sheets. My favorite day of the week is clean sheet day.
Right.
I look forward to clean sheet day like none other. I'll text people and I'll be like, do you know what day it is?
It's laundry day.
Right. I don't like to put the laundry away.
No.
But let me tell you, to climb into bed at night with those clean sheets, that is something that I really like. And I think I pass that perception on to a lot of people because I get super excited about that.
Yeah.
So I get
exciting.
There's nothing better than
life.
coming home to a clean house.
Right.
But how often do you guys expect the same results when you're with new people or when you're having a similar experience that you want to end totally differently? Like, how often do you fall back into those same patterns and have a perception that it's going to end the same way? How often do you say, well, I don't know why that person can get away with it. If I tried that, I'd get in all kinds of trouble.
Right? For sure.
Another example of a perception that you have. Or we put perceptions on ourselves, well, things always break down on me when I try to go do this. Or, it's just my luck that this bad thing happens. And it really is just perception and where we're putting our attention.
I think we can even bring that into phobias that we kind of adapt or we create within ourselves. So quick example, I was, 15 or 16 years old, and I stepped on a ground beehive, and the bees swarmed me and went up my shorts and went up my back, and I jumped in the neighbor's pool to get them off and had 18 stings. So now I hear a little buzz, and I can run faster than an Olympic gold medalist. And it's probably a beautiful butterfly who learned how to hum or something, and I am gone. And I know that I can kill the bee. I know I'm bigger than the bee. I know the bee's not going to kill me. But I am scared out of my mind from a tiny sound because of what has happened before in my life.
I don't think you're alone in that phobia. I swear there's a video of me somewhere on the internet at Universal Studios when I was and I took off running and I'm screaming and I'm waving my arms, and I'm sure everybody at Universal Studios thought I was crazy. And let me tell you, this was like 6 years ago. So it's not even, all right. It's not even like I was a teenager or younger. I was a full-grown adult, and I'm very embarrassed to admit that, maybe.
But you know how you have those moments as an adult or as a parent where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a parent. Like, I just did that. I'm the mom. So I was driving with my daughter, who is still in a car seat, and she's going to be 20. And there was a bee in the car. And I pulled over, and the first thing I did, I pulled my car over and I jumped out of the car. And then I looked, and she's still buckled into the back seat. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do right now? How do I get her out of the car without dying from this little teeny tiny bee that is in my front windshield? And I remember opening the door, getting her out of the car, and then sitting on the side of the road crying because nobody was hurt, nobody was anything, but I was so filled with so much emotion. I saved her from the big bad troll that lives underneath the bridge. It was ridiculous. But having that moment of overcoming the perception of what this bee could possibly do to me in my car or what it could do to my daughter, which is nothing. It's nothing. I mean, we would get a little sting and we would move on with our lives. But it was my I'm a mom moment.
That superhero moment.
Yes.
And, that's actually interesting that you point that out. But one of a really great way to help us start shifting our perception is to focus on those moments, of success and those wins that we've had, because that can help us change the story that we tell ourselves. Kind of goes back to, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but Brene Brown put a new special out on Netflix.
Yes.
Fantastic. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. I had a great takeaway from that. And she talks about how when her and her spouse or her husband argue, that they start with the story I'm telling myself is. And I have really adapted that into my language and vernacular. And Charlene will probably even attest to it because I did it quite a bit earlier when I was talking about a situation. And it really helps put things into perspective and to recognize that this is only what's going on in my head. That might not be what's going on in somebody else's head. It might not be what's going on in truth, because I might have a jaded view and I've only got a little bit of the story and I've only got my experiences to draw from, and I don't have what's going on from the other person.
I know. I loved her story. It was about swimming. We won't tell you the story. We'll let her tell you. But I was like, oh, that makes sense. You have those moments where you're like, I get it. I've been that person. I've been like, what are you doing? Just kidding. Thanks for doing that. So, yeah, it was a great, great documentary to watch, or short episode, I don't know what you would call what she did. Live.
Yeah, I don't know
thing.
What it is either, but you can find it on Netflix, and you should totally go watch it because it was totally worth it. I recommend it to everybody because I loved it. But that actually goes back to kind of what I was talking to Charlene about a little bit earlier, and I won't bore you guys with all of the details, but ultimately is I have a situation appearing in my life and it made me angry. And so this happened last night and I was angry. I was angry at somebody else. And I sat back and I asked myself, why? Why am I angry about this? Why is this affecting me? What's going on? And the answer that came to me is because the situation and the person and all of it is making me feel worthless. How many of you have been there? Mm-hmm. We constantly live in a society where we feel like we're not good enough, that we don't fit in, that we're not measuring up. And that's really what I was feeling, is I felt like my time was being devalued. My contribution to a very long-standing situation was being devalued, and I was feeling worthless. And as I thought about that, it was, okay, so I'm mad at him because he's quote-unquote making me feel worthless. But the thing is he doesn't have that power. I'm choosing to feel that way, and I can take that power back, and I can choose to feel any way that I want. And when I kind of remove myself from that situation and from those feelings, and I can see how I'm allowing myself to be that way, it removes the anger from the situation. It doesn't make the situation right. It doesn't make it okay that it's happening that way, but it gives me back the power. Instead of getting angry, instead of throwing stones, instead of having this argument, which only hurts me because I'm the one feeling that way. The other person involved in the situation is not feeling that way. So if I can stop and I can choose to come from a different emotional state, I can also have a significant influence on the outcome. I don't know how this is all going to work out yet. So as listeners, I will keep you guys posted. Just being able to recognize that and come out of that state of anger was a pretty major accomplishment for me. And a shift in perception, which is what we've been talking about all month long, is how to shift your perception. And using that phrase, the story I'm telling myself is, and I was really able to see that he was coming from someplace else. I was really able to see that I was taking control of the way that I felt, even though it was how I was perceiving somebody else's words and actions.
I think sometimes, though, even when we're perceiving somebody's words and actions, at least for both of us, like, we're very rational. We talk about things. I know we're going to talk about this in another episode, but just because you can recognize it and you can see where the other person's coming from or what you can do, and you take back that power, still doesn't make it easier to sit in that situation at that moment. Does that make sense? So you're here, you're like, okay, I'm not going to let him make me feel like that, but you already felt like that. You can't take it back. You can't take back how you felt. You just have to process it and kind of move through it.
That's very true. Like, I can't take back the way that I felt yesterday, but I can. But the thing is, and it doesn't make it easier. Well, it does make it easier to deal with the situation because I can recognize it. If I didn't recognize it and I was coming from that place of anger, it would be a whole different conversation. It would be a whole different situation. And I would be sitting here feeling miserable. So to your point, it doesn't make it feel great. That doesn't mean that it feels great. But I do think that it makes it easier to process through because you're not letting yourself be dragged down into all of those negative emotions, because you can recognize and appreciate where the other person is coming from. Even if the situation itself doesn't necessarily feel good, you can stop yourself from stooping down to whatever emotional frequency or wherever they're at emotionally. Does that
right? Absolutely, yeah. No, it makes sense. That I like the way that you said that. You're right. It makes it easier for you to process it and to come out of it. Not necessarily them, not the situation. It's not going to change anything. It's going to really change what's going on with you, and that's the key, right? To live a happy, healthy life.
Absolutely. That is actually the main thing. That's the only thing, because that's the only thing that we actually have control over is our own thoughts and our own feeling. And once we give up that control on how another person is going to act and how another person is going to feel and what they're going to do and what they're going to say, and we give that up, we can actually live from that place of contentment, from that place of joy. We can feel like we have a sense of belonging somewhere because we're really only in control of ourselves, and that's the only thing that we really have to be focused on. Yes, you still have to be a good parent. Yes, you still have to help your children grow up to be responsible human beings. You're still responsible for all of that. You still have to get along with your coworkers. If you want to keep your job, you have to make the decision to follow the processes and procedures. But what you're thinking about each one of those tasks, how you feel about it, is the only thing that you're responsible for. You are not responsible for how anybody else perceives those, what anybody else says about them, nor are you responsible for taking on the accountability for the way that any of that is, because you are only responsible for the decisions that you make for yourself.
Awesome. I think that is a great way to wrap up perception on this 4 weeks that we've been talking about it. It really is. Take control back. Only you have that power, right?
Absolutely. I love it.
Yes. Well, thanks so much for joining us again. We look forward to talking with you guys next week. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast and let us know if you have anything that you want to talk about, or if you want us to even dig in deeper on any specific topic that we've previously talked about.
Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next week.